The first instinct was like run, move, change jobs. Like I would get like this angsty feeling when I would feel uncomfortable. I've never been a fitness person my entire life. That's why I did meth, because I struggled with weight, and that was the easy solution for me. And if you're going to be an addict, let's be honest, being a fitness addict is not the worst thing in the world, as long as you're being mindful and you're eating enough calories and doing all the other stuff. The only thing I knew I wanted to do was have kids, but I was very entrepreneurial as a child.
So, what is up, everybody? Thank you for joining another episode of Experts of the Roundtable. Today, I'm here with Angie Manson. It is a pleasure to have you on here. I was just on your podcast, and it was just a great conversation. So, I'm excited to have you on here.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, your story is extremely powerful, especially starting with just the 10-year prison sentence that you were facing. Can you kind of go back to when all that was like going on and kind of like what led up to that?
Sure. So I grew up in the 70s, and I was a latchkey kid, which basically meant I was responsible for getting myself to school and home and sort of take care of myself till my mom was able to get home after she had a full day of work. So growing up in low income housing and being responsible for myself, I ended up hanging out with a lot of other kids with too much time on their hand, too much freedom, and we ended up getting in a lot of trouble. So really, I started drinking, using, smoking cigarettes at 11 years old. By the time I was 16, my mom, and I dropped out of school, my mom realized I had an issue. I was in my first rehab. And I continued this because at 16, I was definitely not ready for rehab. I was a teenager in the 80s. We were having the time of our life. There was like no downside in my mind, except maybe, school. But I didn't even feel like that was a thing, because I was able to enroll myself into continuing education and still make up for credits, even though I wasn't showing up to class. So I felt very empowered. I was working, I was doing all the things. But when I turned 18, my mom kicked me out of the house. It wasn't like I was like, oh, now I'm an adult, there's going to be like lifelong consequences. I just continued on that same track. And within a few years, I had gotten myself a job at a rental car place who allowed me to rent on cash because I was an employee, which typically, you need to be a certain age, you need to have credit. But because I worked there, they sort of bypassed some of these rules. And I had been hanging out with my friend who went to rehab herself when we were 17 in Santa Cruz. And I grew up in Reno. So I went to go visit her and all my friends that I had made there, and ended up getting into a few different accidents and different situations where I ended up not being able to return the car to work, which meant I couldn't return to work, which meant I was like, oh, I guess I live in Santa Cruz now. I'll just forget about that and continue my life. Now I'm back here. What I didn't realize is because I had kept the car an extended amount of time, and because it was over value of $10,000, the company filed embezzlement charges on me. And because I worked there, it was considered embezzlement and not grand larceny. And I didn't even know this had occurred. And I was doing some other unsavory thing when I was drunk I shouldn't have been doing. And when they ran my record, that's when they realized I was facing this significant charge. And I got arrested and sent back to Reno to sort of face charges for this. And for me, I was like 21 years old. And the judge gave me the option to either enroll in a rehab for a year and pay back the restitution, which was like $13,000, or go to prison for 10 years. And for me, that was an obvious choice. I'd been around prison types. I did not feel like I was a prison type, nor did I want to. I didn't actually even think, what I had been doing was so bad or wrong. Certainly wasn't intentional, but it did occur. And so that's where I ended up at the rehab. I chose one, and it's very difficult to find a rehab. I mean, this was over 30 years ago, very challenging that will house you or put you through a program for a year, especially because I didn't have a lot of money. My grandma was able to come up with some money, but there wasn't a lot there to find like the best rehab. And so I went to the program my best friend had gone through in the executive director's house. That's how small this rehab was. And because I couldn't really afford to pay for it, within a month of being a client, I was working to earn my keep. And so that's how I ended up in rehab. It was 30 years ago this year. And continuing on with the story. So since I started working, I started learning every position within the organization. And so at a year, I went back to the judge because part of the thing was to go back every 6 months and check on the progress. So after my year, he was blown away by the progress. I mean, here I was, this girl who was, a train wreck waiting to happen, hanging around all the bad people, doing all the bad things. And he had saw such a transformation in that year. He said, look, this is fantastic. Your year in rehab is concluded. However, you still have probation for 2 years and you still have this $13,000 restitution hanging out here. So I'm going to need to see you every 6 months. You're going to have to continue to, submit your UAs, work with a probation officer, but you have this 10 years hanging over your head. So just know if you do anything, that sentence is going to hit you. No matter how much good time you've put in before then, that is going to be hanging out there. And so for me, again, another easy decision. It's like, well, I don't have any kind of stability or means of supporting myself or a support group where the odds of me not getting in trouble again would not be in my favor. And so I stayed put and I continued working and going and see the same judge every 6 months. And I became like the right-hand man of the executive director. He was like the dad I never had because I grew up without a father. So he was kind of like my dad, and that was the relationship we had, but I was also his right-hand man. So I was learning everything he was doing in the organization, what worked, what didn't work, the PR. I was like his PR cleanup a lot of the time, like with families and clients, because he would say and do the craziest stuff. So it was almost like this like intense internship on how to be a boss and what works and what doesn't work and learning human nature. And since I never went to college, and I barely graduated high school, that was the majority of my learning was just observation. And so at the end of the 3 years, went back to the same judge. This time I brought my posse. I had the executive director. I had my family there because it was Reno. So my grandpa and grandma were in the courtroom. Like I had everybody there, and I was feeling pretty good about it. I walk in and my new public defender, because you get a new one every time, said, listen, you need to be prepared. They're going to be proposing another 3 years of probation on your side because you haven't attacked this $13,000 restitution, and that's still hanging out there. And so they're going to suggest another 3 years of doing what you're doing. And I was like, damn. And not that, I couldn't do it, but I really had been ready for this to be done and made the progress. The thing is, back then, even though minimum wage laws were a thing, we didn't necessarily abide by those, but I had a roof over my head. I had cigarettes in my pocket and food in my mouth. I didn't really care. And I knew, a lot of my pay was going towards learning and, having a safe space and everything provided for. So I never really thought about it, but that didn't make a progress towards this $13,000 that I owed. And so when we went into the courtroom, and this is the same judge I've been seeing every 6 months, he listened to what the DA was proposing, and he stopped and looked for a second, and then he turned and looked at the prosecuting attorney, and he said, it is so seldom I get to see successes in this courtroom. I've been doing this for 30 years. It's a very rare occasion. This girl has done everything she's supposed to do and then some. And that the insurance company paid for that car 3 years ago. So I don't know what you're trying to get out of her. It was like he was like admonishing him in front of everybody. It was amazing. I was like, oh, yeah, awesome. That's right. You tell him. And he looked at me, he said, young lady, you have done the work. I am so proud of you. I'm so proud of your progress. Please continue on. You are now free. We're wiping away your charges, your restitution, all that. You have a clean slate on life. You go do you. And that was it. And I just broke down. I was profusely crying. I'd never heard or seen this happen to anybody. You know, it was like a pardon. I didn't even know they had that kind of power. I don't know why I didn't know this, but it was pre-internet. We didn't know this stuff. All my learning came from Law and Order. But I was like, oh my God, it really happened. I did the work. I did what I was supposed to do. And from that point on, I mean, I stayed in the same spot I was, but now I was there on my own volition. I'd found my passion and purpose, which was helping others who were like me. I had a good story to lead from the front to show hope to others. And that's where I've been. That's where I've spent, that first 3 and this final 27. I ended up taking over for my executive director, and we ran that program for 20 years. And then about 9 years ago, branched out and started my own program. So yeah, that's the very short version of my learning of life and entrepreneurship and business and overcoming addiction.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely incredible because like I grew up with addiction and all of that, and there's so many people that get faced with that opportunity that you got faced with, but don't end up taking it. They just continue to go and spiral out of control, and they end up getting those 10 years. So
Yeah.
like it's beautiful for what the judge did, for how he kind of handled it, for how you handled it as well, because a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
And addiction, it's like it's not easy to beat. It's not easy to like get and stay sober. What would you say were some of the like toughest challenges you faced when it came to like the addiction part, and like how'd you overcome those?
For me, I think, the first instinct was like run, move, change jobs. Like I would get like this angsty feeling when I would feel uncomfortable with any situation. And really, I just wanted to use, right? Like I wanted to numb out. And when I couldn't or didn't think that was like going to happen, I wanted to escape. And, that was a coping mechanism I acquired as a young kid. It followed me through addiction. It's just that escapism. And so the way I've gotten through it, how I'm still here 30 years later, is I write it out. I experience it. I go through the emotion. I sleep it off and I say, okay, tomorrow morning, we're going to take the next step, take the next step, take the next step. And that's really what I've been doing for 30 years is taking the next step. I've never given myself permission to, oh, it's okay, give yourself a break this time or give yourself, some sort of reward or time off because you've worked so hard. It's like I don't let myself stop because in my mind, if I stop, all that will catch up to me. All those hormones I get from continuing to take steps are going to dissipate. And then I'm going to go through the depression and then I'm going to go through
Yeah.
how can I fix this depression? So I am just constantly trying to keep myself in motion, taking steps forward. Even if I don't know what to do something, like do some kind of action. I see so many people just get paralyzed with inaction because they can't make decisions or they don't know what to do or there's no guarantee. Shit, there is no guarantee in life. Like no, and what I've learned, especially like in the last 10 years of my entrepreneurship, is nobody knows your business like you. So it's like you can get great advice, but really the person, it's been for me, it's been inside of me to sort of go, I know they're the expert and they're telling me this, but it just doesn't quite feel right for me. And just learning to sort of trust myself in my decisions, what I'm doing, even though I don't have the education or all the things that say I should know how to operate and handle what I'm doing.
Yep, no, 100%. I mean, I've joined coaching programs where they're like, you need to do this, and it just completely like tanked our business following
Yeah.
the advice that they were giving. So I fully believe in that. When it comes to like the way that your treatment center kind of works, do you guys believe in the 12 steps? Like, what's your philosophy around how you actually help people get and stay sober?
Yeah. So we don't not believe in the 12 steps, but that's just not the philosophy that we utilize. We created our own copyrighted curriculum of life skills that they do touch on a lot of the same things. I mean, there is a full writing up of transgressions, which I know is one of the steps. There's also a full amends that they do, but they do all of that while they're with us. And so the other components that we put into the program is fitness and health, because I believe that is like the cornerstone of why a lot of people relapse, why they don't do well in life, why they feel depressed, why they don't feel good, especially for somebody that's coming off long-term alcohol or drug use. Like their hormones are messed up. And so the norm of what's happening in society is you walk in, let's say, from alcohol, which happens to be our number one drug of choice by far within our rehab. You walk in addicted to alcohol, you're going to be put on probably 5 different kinds of medications at least to, help you sleep, to help you wake up in the morning, to stabilize your mood, all the things. And so you walk out medicated on 5 different prescription drugs, sober, but you're like literally nodding out because you're so medicated. That is what's the new norm. I wouldn't even say new norm. It's been getting gradually worse for many, many years, but that's what's passing as rehab these days. Find a sponsor, do some meetings, sleep here for 30 days. Good luck. Now you're sober on medications. You're in Big Pharma's pocket. And so for us, we're like, no, we want everybody off everything before they even leave our detox. So again, other programs will taper them through their whole program, put them on other stuff. We don't even let them start the program until they're off everything. And miraculously, that happens pretty quickly when they're just sitting around wanting to start a program. They will naturally wean themselves off quicker, and maybe it's not as comfortable, but they also want to do the program because they see it. They see the results. They come to graduations. They see the wins and how healthy, positive, and effective people are. They're like, they start to go, maybe I could have that and maybe I want that. And so that is a big differentiator with us as well. We also have graduations. We actually have a copyrighted curriculum where there's a product at the end of it. It's not just, okay, your insurance quit paying, you're out, bye, good luck, finish elsewhere. Like we have a program that you do all the steps. That's what gives you the highest success, not do part of them or some of them and hope for the best. We actually have codified, and we've been tracking it since day one. So this is 9 years system of a high success rate of doing our program and then being successful after they leave.
I love that. Yeah, because my cousin, he was addicted to heroin and he got trapped in that cycle of the treatment centers and halfway houses because it was in Florida and there's not very many ethical stuff going on in Florida. So like the treatment centers, the halfway houses, the insurance companies, all kind of working together. So he'd go to the treatment, they'd flush out his system, tell him that he's sober, send him to a halfway house. The halfway house would like put money on all these different cards, and then they'd be able to go trade those cards for drugs, and then they'd be back in the treatment center. And it went on for I think 5 or 6 years, something like that.
Yeah, how corrupt is that? Like because of that, that unethical behavior, the county or the law, the state had to come in and put in all kinds of rules because of stuff like that. It's crazy.
Yeah. And then not only that, like they try to, like he was like, man, these people keep trying to pay me like thousands of dollars because they want me to go out on the streets and find more addicts so that way they can put them through this entire thing. And like it was fucked up.
Wow.
For
and so your brother
so long.
went through that. So you have firsthand knowledge. Yeah, that's what happened to rehab. Someone realized you could make once Obamacare went into place and it was mandatory to pay for rehab. That's where the corruption came in. All the bad players came in because they could see a way of taking advantage of monetarily addicts and alcoholics, and that right there is one of the biggest ways that started.
Yeah. I think it's getting a little bit better now, but still, like it's not going to be perfect. That's why I really like what you guys do, because like you've gone through all of this shit yourself. You're not just some venture capitalist that kind of came in and is like, okay, I can make $20,000-$30,000 for somebody coming in here for a month. The insurance company's going to pay it, and it's going to be perfectly fine. Like your story
Mm.
has been there. You've done that. You've gone through the process. And I love how you went through the mentorship essentially to learn how to run your organization, because that's one of the most powerful things that I think a lot of people are skipping out on, especially as entrepreneurs. Like they'll go and buy a
Mhm.
$50 course, and the next thing you know, they're a marketing expert charging
Yeah.
thousands of dollars to run somebody's marketing and just completely just losing the money. So you took the time and like went through all of that to like, it was probably one of the best investments, either 10 years in prison or going through what you did for a few years to being able to become this entrepreneur. Even though did you have that, like, did you know that you wanted to like start your own rehab and do all that? Or is that something
Oh
that kind of
God, no.
evolved?
The only thing I knew I wanted to do was have kids, but I was very entrepreneurial as a child. Like my friends and I, like this is bad. We would steal, like when it was dark, we stole other people's candy bars and then we would sell them and make money for ourselves. Or we would draw pictures and sell those for like 30 cents and put in some candy and
Oh,
stuff
wow.
like that. Like I was always trying to creatively come up with ideas of how to hustle. That was one thing I loved growing up in the 80s because, or 70s and 80s, because we just learned work ethic. Like nothing was handed to
Yeah.
anybody. You had to earn everything you got. And so you had to be creative. You had to have critical thinking. You had to learn how to think outside the box for survival. We didn't have phones. We didn't have this. So there was like so much besides what I've learned at being at the rehab, but just the era that I grew up in where you just naturally had to adapt to a lot of these things that in today's times, it's just not that way. Everybody has a phone. Everything is comfort. Everything is ease. Everything is instantaneous. Like you don't have to think. You don't have to have critical thinking skills to survive these days. Back then, that was mandatory. And so I think that's why that's one of my super strengths is because we had to figure shit out. So we weren't told what to do.
Yeah.
Like we literally had to figure it out. And it was usually through trial and error.
And that's still pretty unique for back then, because I mean, back then everybody was like, okay, you have to get a
Mhm.
job, go to college, like
Yep.
follow
You're a
your
girl. You just
career.
find a man, get married. Yep. True.
Yeah. So like that's still like super unique way of thinking, especially for back then. I mean, my dad, he's been at the same job for 20 years. He hates it, just
Oh,
absolutely hates it, but he still shows up 6 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, is there until
yeah.
4, goes home. And yeah, so
You're my mom as well.
like,
I mean, for years she just hated her job. Is all we heard about, and that's one thing. Like my when the thing I think is my biggest strength in our as an organization is our core values and our culture. So 95% of the people that work for me have all been through the program and overcome addiction. So we understand, we lead from the front, but it's all about the culture. Like we know this is a purpose. Like we're serving the planet. We're not here to make a ton of money, but we are here to make a difference. And what we get in exchange for saving lives is a feeling that most people will never experience, or they'll have to find that outside of their jobs. Like their job doesn't provide it. Like they got to go work at the women's shelter once a year to feel that feeling. We get to feel that every day and we get paid for it and we're making a difference on the planet. So for me, the purpose and the culture is like everything. It makes it not a job. So then when, you're doing a late night medical emergency pickup in the middle of the night, people aren't like, oh my God, this is the worst job ever. They're like, oh my God, someone's in need, let me go help them. So a lot of it is the culture and just being appreciative that we're able to have such an awesome purpose and see such amazing results every single day, every single week.
love that. No, that's beautiful. I mean, that's one reason I started my business and work with coaches, is because like that purpose driven aspect of, I don't see myself as a coach. I more see myself as somebody that likes to sit behind the computer and do things.
Yeah.
So that's why I like to use what I call God's gifts that he gave me to help other people use their God's gifts and really just be able to make that ripple effect of impact throughout the entire world. Because like I can only help so many people. And if I can help 10, 15 people help thousands of people, then like it just ends up being millions of people being impacted along the way, which is
Yeah.
just, I love that that's your vision as well, and why you do things.
Yeah, I mean, look, I could have sold to PE for all those same reasons, but like what I knew about it is maybe I would get rich, but my team wouldn't be protected. Our curriculum wouldn't
Yeah.
be protected because let's be honest, it's not the most cost effective program. Like for those programs, the way they make their profit is like you have a couple staff, you medicate everybody so they're like subdued, you wait out their 30 days, build their insurance, and they're out. Well, we're like the opposite. We have so many staff because we care about the product, not the profit. Although we know we need profit to survive, but it's more like, how are the
Yeah.
people doing? What manpower can we provide to ensure their safety, to ensure the safety of the entire center, and make sure they're actually getting what they need to get as they go along, not just a 5-star meal and massages and your insurance paid for it. Isn't it great? You're sober now. Like we actually have to do the work, get them to go to course. They have chores. Like we're literally training them how to be successful after rehab, because most rehabs don't set you up that way. They treat you like you're at the Taj Mahal, even though you were just in the gutter last week because you have good insurance. They, fluff you up for 30 days and they send you on your way. You didn't do anything to handle your addiction, So like this is actually providing value because, we use accountability. Like, your word is everything. And so it's a nice mixture of accountability with tools. Like we utilize meditation and mindfulness to handle triggers, confronting your past, being strong, identifying toxic people, but yet not just being sober when you leave, but being a productive, kick-ass individual in society that can handle any situation that they come to without feeling like if I don't go to a meeting every day, I'm going to relapse and die and I'm an addict the rest of my life. Like we literally help them overcome addiction so they don't have to identify themselves as that person in that box for the rest of their life when they're clearly not using or needing to use.
Which is huge. I think normal like treatment, like when I went through, they're like, once an addict, always an addict. And I personally don't believe that. Like, I don't really have triggers. I don't like, there's no part of me that is like, okay, I want to go do an 8 ball of cocaine today. Like
Right.
before, before I like had that shift, I think we talked about it on the podcast, your podcast is like, it's about the identity.
Yeah.
Um, what was it like? What identity shift do you think you needed to have to kind of go from like the almost 10 years to being one of the most productive people that the judge has ever seen to like creating this absolutely kick-ass treatment center that is actually creating productive people in society?
I mean, I would say trust in myself, because you can hit that imposter syndrome. Like, what makes me so special? But I think my biggest strength is never wavering, like not being able to be tempted or perverted into, a substandard product or, hurting people or any of the things. It's just staying the course of what's right and trusting in myself that I know what's right, even though society wouldn't say this, girl who grew up in the ghetto has any right to have like opinions about this, but just trusting in myself that I am on a mission. I am here to help people. I will do that at whatever cost. I'm not going to be swayed or tempted by different scenarios that would affect either of those things. And I think that's really hard because it's a really hard business. And so you've got to be strong where you're seeing this like easy road over here, money, glitz, you're set up for your life. Your kids are set up. Don't you want to go this way? And then you see the much harder path where it's like, okay, you've got all the things that we have, 80 employees in healthcare in California and navigating all that and the laws and this and that and much harder road and, nobody's getting rich. And it's like, but it's the right thing to do. And so for me, it's
Yeah,
the North Star of what's the right thing to do and always coming back to that.
I love that. Especially like the trust in yourself. A lot of the people that I sit down
Yeah.
and talk to that are extremely successful, they have like this delusional sense of confidence in their self and their abilities because you kind of have to have that because there's so many people
Yeah.
around you that are expecting you to fail. Especially like you said, you grew up in the ghetto, very like lower class family, stuff like that.
Right.
Uh, Not very many people get out of that.
Yeah.
So it's awesome to kind of like see your evolution and hear about your evolution, because it's just extremely powerful. And like you didn't stop at recovery. How did kind of like CrossFit change things for you, and what did it kind of bring into your life?
Yeah, so I had mentioned we had ran this other program for 20 years. And then when we created Elevate, I had already been doing CrossFit. I've never been a fitness person my entire life. You know, that's why I did meth, because I struggled with weight, and that was the easy solution for me. But I also had this heart condition. So I have all these limiting beliefs about like what health. I also grew up in the 70s. We didn't eat salt. We ate bland food. Like there was just, we didn't have the knowledge. We had that food pyramid that's super messed up of like what we believed was true, but wasn't. And so I didn't grow up the healthiest, and certainly I couldn't cook. Couldn't exercise in my mind. And so when I found CrossFit, it was because it was a community and it was a group activity. It actually originates here in Santa Cruz. And my people from work had already started doing it. So I really just did it to be part of the group, because I'm a dork like that. And I love community and I want to be part of a group. But what I ended up loving about it was that it was unpredictable and it pushed you, and I found strengths like lifting weight I didn't know I actually had. And I had my weaknesses, which was my heart and all this other stuff, which I was able to work around and build up to. And so what I loved about CrossFit is the community aspect, the almost like you're like in war, like you're in the trenches together. You're like in combat. You're like physically, mentally putting yourself through it. You don't care what's happening with anybody else. You're 100% in the present of what's happening with you. And then that builds camaraderie. So when we originated Elevate, I really wanted a health aspect in it, because I could see the power of the group. Like when you're deep in addiction, you're isolating, you're in your home
Yeah.
alone, you're not, out partying and having fun. It reaches some very lonely places. So CrossFit forces you to not only be part of a group activity, do the same thing, do this together, but high five each other. And it's not about who's the fastest, who's the quickest. It's usually who's working hard, but maybe they're the slowest and they have limitations, but they did it, and being there for that person. So it almost instills this like work on yourself, get validation, be there for others, where it pulls people out of their shells. So they're not isolating. They have accountability with a group. They feel good. They're being pushed to do things. Like we have people come in, strung out on heroin, 100 pounds, and they leave like jacked within 2 months, because they're just consistent. And we're trying to build that habit and that muscle for 66 days of working out, where you're creating a new healthy routine. And if you're going to be an addict, let's be honest, being a fitness addict is not the worst thing in the world, as long as you're being mindful and
Yep.
you're eating enough calories and doing all the other stuff. But it's such a cornerstone to our mental health that I knew it had to be in the program, because that's going to give people the edge, like we were talking about, where AA and NA don't. They have no attention on the body. And so what do people do? They smoke, they drink coffee, dark rooms. They're just not healthy. And so then they don't feel good, even though they're sober and they should feel good. This forces you to reset all those neural pathways like quickly, and then feel good. And then you're ready to like take on the world when you leave Elevate, because you've been doing the work physically, mentally,
Yeah.
spiritually, and emotionally.
I love that. Yeah, I think I've went to, because growing up I went to, what is it, three different treatment centers that were both, they were all outpatient, so I got to go home just because I was a minor and everything, so they didn't like try to keep me there. Like there was no fitness, there was no activity. We just went and we sat in a room. We would say the Serenity Prayer a couple times. We'd do schoolwork, and then we would talk to a therapist, and then they would just send us home. That was pretty much it, almost
Yeah.
every single day of the week. And if we missed, then we'd go spend a weekend in the little juvenile detention center, because they just wanted to. I don't know why, but
Well, they
it's
made money.
anytime we missed one day. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's powerful, because ever like as human beings, we're kind of programmed to be addicts in one way or another. And it's all about picking what you're addicted to. It could be reading, it could be listening to podcasts, it could be
Mm.
um,
Shopping.
fitness, like shopping, like
Mhm.
dopamine, like scrolling on
Yeah.
Facebook and all of these things. And it really is important that you pick the right area to kind of go down. Um, when it comes to the people that kind of come in, do you see it as a lot of more like, has the demographic of the people come in been primarily younger over the years, or have they gotten kind of older? Because I know with college and how much people
Right.
drink there, I do think that college is just creating this generation of alcoholics.
For sure. Yeah, no, we all over from 18 to 80. We have everything in between. So prior to the pandemic, like our clientele, it was split kind of 50-50. Half were there for alcohol, half were there for everything else combined. So, at that point it was like heroin, meth, coke, pills, weed, whatever. 51% alcohol, 49, and mostly you're right, the demographic for the older people of older alcoholics, that was like the demographic. Fast forward through the pandemic and it has drastically changed. Now our demographic is 79 80% alcoholics, 21%
Wow.
everything else combined. So that's even with fentanyl hitting the scene and how big and bad that is, mostly because it's killing people, but also because that's how big alcohol has become, because what, everybody was forced to stay home. Alcohol was
Yeah.
considered essential. The day drinking, the non-accountability, because people didn't have to go anywhere or do anything. It wasn't like the pandemic ended and everybody was like, oh, okay, go back to normal life. Like after doing that for 2 straight years, many people who never had a problem now have a problem and they don't know how to come back from it. And it is parents of teenagers and kids, and it's also younger kids. You're right. Like the youth, the extent that the youth are using now, and maybe it's because of that whole safe thing as well. Like I don't want to take anything because I could die, but drinking is safe. But how
Yeah.
bad everybody has gotten. Like this year alone, we've had to send 3 people to the hospital that came in for the program to be put in a medically induced coma to get through DTs because they were so
Wow.
physically, mentally saturated. I've seen people seize 3 weeks after being sober off of safely detoxing and doing normal life with these latent and delayed uh, hallucinations and seizures and things. Like it's crazy the damage that alcohol is doing, but nobody's talking about that, right? Like now we're finally
Yeah.
mentioning fentanyl, but nobody talks about like this can happen with alcohol. So it is like the most sneaky and hard drug that's out there, and it's almost like unknown that it's even a problem. But every age
Yeah.
with
No.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. I have another cousin that was an addict as well. I mean, it freaking just ran through our blood. Um, but he died, I believe he was 24 years old of cirrhosis of the liver because he was drinking a
Wow.
bottle, like a one set, almost, I believe it was around a 175 of Jack Daniels almost every day.
Ugh,
And
wow.
plus, we were doing ecstasy and all of these other drugs that were just really bad on your liver.
Yeah.
And like it's crazy how many lives we're losing so young. I have another friend where he was at a party, he OD'd on fentanyl, and
Oh,
everybody was too scared to call 911, so they put him in their car, drove him to Minneapolis, Minnesota, which was like I think like 30 or 40 minutes from where they were. Pulled him out of the car, threw him on the sidewalk, and called 911 and made an anonymous tip saying that there's a guy laying there. They think he OD'd, and my buddy died. And it's fucked up what drugs can do. Like it
it's
really
fucked
is.
up. And then what you just said is the norm. Like we've had probably 20
Yeah.
kids in the last 4 years die of fentanyl, and most of them probably could have been prevented if their friends had just called 911. But everybody gets scared.
Yeah. Yeah. Like my other cousin, the one that was going through the different treatments and stuff like that, like the amount of times that people walked in and his lips were blue and he was ODing and they saved him, I think it's like 5 or 6. And it's
Wow.
crazy how the way that an addict thinks is they're so high in that moment that they get mad at the
Yeah.
people for injecting them with shit, what's it called? When you have to
The
like
Narcan.
put it into
Oh,
them.
oh,
Yeah, with Narcan.
that's like the straight adrenaline. Yeah, forget what it's called.
Yeah, he's had to get that a few times, and
Mm.
the the people around him were like the anger that he had because he was just so high and just so like feeling good per se,
Yeah.
and it's just it's wild what these drugs can do, especially how addictive a lot of them are.
Yep.
But I think a lot of people they're like down in St. Petersburg where I'm from. A lot of people are doing like kratom now,
Mm-hmm.
which you've heard of
Oh
that,
yeah.
I'm sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can buy it
And
in any store here. It's crazy. Yeah.
yeah, and it's huge with the entrepreneurs and the amount of money that these places are
Mm.
making at like kratom bars and stuff down in St. Petersburg. Because it's like,
Oh wow.
yeah, they have like actual like bars, and people are like, hey, I don't drink alcohol anymore. And I heard this one lady that was working there, and she was like, I don't drink alcohol anymore. I used to spend like $400 or $500 a weekend just on drinking. And
Mm.
but if you look at it, just to get like an 8 ounce thing of kratom is $6.40,
Mm.
and people are drinking 2 to 3 of those a day.
Wow.
And you just add everything up, it's way more expensive. A good friend of mine, he spent $20,000 just at one kratom bar in a year.
Wow. Wow.
$20,000. But
That's
he prides
crazy.
himself because he doesn't drink anymore.
Right? That's the insanity about it. Also, how many entrepreneurs do we know who are on Adderall? And I'm like, you realize that's just
Yeah,
speed, right? Like you guys are acting like, this is for my ADHD. This is for my this. I'm like, you're just taking legal meth. Like you can dress it up any way you
yeah,
want, but you're on speed. Like it's not like a rocket science while you're working hard and grinding and doing all the shit. You're taking drugs. But it's legal and my doctor prescribed it. So therefore I have a condition. So therefore it's totally acceptable and okay in today's society.
yeah. It's it's like alcohol. They just think that because it's legal, uh, it's it it's not horrible for you, even though they know that it's definitely not good for them. Um, Even with like antidepressants and stuff like that. Like when I was 16 years old, I was diagnosed with ODD, oppositional defiance disorder, PTSD, depression, and bipolarness. And until I was like 24 years old, I stayed with those labels. I was like,
Yeah.
I am these things. So I'm going to like my subconscious would just act those things out.
Yep.
And
And you had a
once
free pass. You
I,
had a free pass to do that because
yep,
of your label.
yep. And it's sad because it's
Yeah.
kids are getting younger and younger and younger and they're getting these labels. So then they just think that they're just fucked up.
Yep.
And are just they allow themselves to stay in that system, and because they're those labels they never change or they never get out of those, and then they're like mentally handicapped.
Yep. I can't tell you how many clients I had through the program who were put on, Ritalin as a child, diagnosed ADHD, all the things. And once we finally get them off everything, and it happens very quickly, they're like, oh my God. They realize like the light bulb goes on, like none of that was true. And look how, like,
Yeah,
after a hard workout session, I can feel this same way by actually working out and feeling good and not being medicated and putting myself in that box and being the victim of this disease. Like, holy shit, like you could see it like start to crack like everything that they believed because they were told this from such a young age, and then realizing that it's not true and seeing how empowered they are to not be that mold that they were raised to be, more or less.
how much do you think victimism, I don't know if that's a word, but
It's huge.
like
It's
how much
huge.
do you think
This is
that
why
that's one
I'm
of like the main?
Yeah. This is why I'm opposed to the disease model concept. And I'm not saying there might not be some physical component to it. And, it runs in the family and the DNA and all that kind of stuff. But I feel like when we call it a disease or a label, now all of a sudden we are the victim of whatever that disease or label is. Yeah. So then you have an out your whole life. You're allowed to be a victim. People are like I'll have people say that to me, like, oh gosh, that's amazing that you guys have all been in recovery. So you can be like really empathetic and sympathetic of people's situations. I'm like, Yes and no. We believe that we created this condition. No matter how messed up our upbringing is, we kind of chose this path. Maybe it was a coping skill, maybe it was because shit happened. But this is a choice that we made at some point. We are not the victim of this choice. And then when you allow people to be the victim, they are never empowered to be the cause. And so
Yep.
we take away all that victimhood. It's like, yeah, you had fucked up shit happen to you when you were a kid. Guess what? We all did. Little traumas, big traumas. It all goes the same way. Some people, get tough. They join the military. This is how they handle it. Other people are like, oh, I saw my other people go through that. I'm not going to utilize that. But some of us found drugs and alcohol as a means of coping. But if I go with the disease mentality, that means I never have to really get well because I'll always have this thing that says, oh, no matter how good I do, I'm still just an addict. It's like so limiting belief and victimy. And I don't believe being a victim of anything is the cure. You have to
Yep.
be causative in order to overcome it.
Yeah, it's all about taking responsibility for even like it's not that you're taking responsibility for the shit that you've gone through. It's you're taking responsibility for how you respond and how you react to the
Yeah,
stuff that you have gone through. Because
exactly.
that is really what makes or breaks people is how they react, which is why two people can go through the same situation and go to the same middle school, the same elementary, the same high school, hang out with the same people, get stuck on drugs for like at the same time, but then 20 years later, one is sitting in prison because he accidentally gave somebody fentanyl and they died and now he was charged with murder. Well, the other one is actually like running a business and stuff like that. I say that because I like experience and I have friends that I went to school with growing up and we got addicted to drugs at the same time and at 24 I was able to get out. At 24 one of my old friends took his daughter and ran to he was supposed to be on where it was like supervised visitation with his daughter, but he took his daughter because his girlfriend like let him have an hour without anybody there just to kind of see if she could trust him and took his daughter, drove to Texas from Minnesota, and I have no idea where he's at now. I'm sure he's in prison for
Wow.
kidnapping his own child, but it's just
Wow.
it's crazy how two people can go through the same thing, but they can respond and react so different. And
Yeah.
for so long, I myself saw myself as a victim. And I was like, all of this shit's happening to me. God sucks. How could God let something like this bad happen to such a young kid and all of this? And then I
Mhm.
realized, like, what the fuck am I doing? This is not how I want to live. And like when you were
Yeah.
faced with the 10 years, like you probably had that same thing. Like, what the fuck am I doing? I'm better than this. I can do better than this. And then
Yeah.
that's exactly what you went on and did, which is fucking incredible.
Yeah. Thanks. I mean, fortunately, I guess I had hung around people who had been to prison. That's who I was hanging out with at the time. So I kind of had a glimpse at what I would end up with if that was the path that I chose. And I'd gone to jail. I'd seen the things. I'd been in there with junkies and prostitutes and everything. And it's like that is what's going to happen to you. You realize that, Angie. Like, this is a conversation I had with myself. Like, there is no other outcome. You're either going to die or you're going to become a junkie prostitute. Like, those or prison, and probably prison the rest of your life. And so being confronted with the reality, much like you were, made it this other way, like, even though it was unknown and it was scary and whatever, way more appealing than knowing what was going to happen the other way.
Love that.
Yeah.
So like beyond the treatment center, I know you offer like one-on-one coaching as well for people that really want to make a serious change. Like what can somebody expect when they work with you on that one-on-one basis?
Yeah. So yeah, besides what Elevate has to offer, I'm also a CrossFit level 1 coach because we have the CrossFit gym up at the center. So for me, it depends on what you want to get. Do you low key want to go through the program, but you have a situation where, because of privacy, you wouldn't be protected. We could work one-on-one through the whole program. Remotely or otherwise. If it's more of a mindset thing and accountability, I'm like mid 75 hard right now. I am like the ultimate accountability coach and pushing you physically, mentally, spiritually to do what it is you need and want to do. I am a counselor, drug and alcohol counselor. So like there's a myriad of things that, depending on what the person needs or wants, that I could work with personally. I have staff that can work with them. We have virtual outpatient, like whatever it is that someone needs or wants. I've probably been there, done that, can provide that in any possible way. I mean, like I have 84 staff. Like I know how to get people to do shit. Like we can do it.
Do you primarily, like for that type of offer, do you primarily see people that are going through addiction, or is it like women that might have gone through some shit growing up and they're like, you know what, I want to kind of level up in my life, I want to level up in business and shit like that?
Yeah, I would say a mixture of both, but pretty much like you and I talked about, even if it's not drugs or alcohol, there can be underlying addictions in everything. And
Yeah.
so a lot of times it's even and sometimes kind of like traumas, like when they're littler and not so obvious and not so bad, people overlook them as a problem because they're comparing it to this, but really this could have the same effect as this. And I'm holding up my hands for the viewers who aren't watching. The little things can have just as big of an effect as the bigger things on a person's psyche. It's just some people's tolerance is way greater for bigger things, and some, the little things affect them the same. So it's getting to the source of that, working through that. Like the biggest thing that I notice is people just want the quick fix, right? They just want the pill. Like, tell me what to do. I'm fixed. I'm better. But it's like the repetitiveness of doing the work. It's the repetitiveness of creating healthy habits. It's the accountability. It's like allowing yourself grace, but not permission to, restart week after week after week. Like you've really got to string together a long enough timeline of doing new good things while confronting the past to really change your life. And I just see so many people, like the second it gets hard or inconvenient or that sort of thing, they just don't want to continue or pursue. They'd rather go the least resistance, softer, easier way than plowing through continually the hard stuff.
And it's funny because the more you do the hard stuff, the easier doing the hard stuff gets. And you just, like you said earlier, you like kind of retrain those neural pathways in your brain in order to like end up just making it so easy. And people don't give themselves enough time doing those hard things in order for it to become easy.
Absolutely.
In
I was going to say, I listened to this amazing podcast with Andrew Huberman, who's this amazing Stanford scientist. He's like the latest craze lately, old punk rocker. So of course I love him. I think he's the best, but he has the science behind a lot of things, including addiction. But he had David Goggins on there, and he asked David, he's like, so David, you go by, you're out there at 4 a.m. You're doing shit that other people won't do. You're stealing souls. You're going harder. You're doing more. You hold yourself accountable. I mean, you got to love this shit, right? Like you wake up in the morning and you can't wait to get after it. And Goggins said, no, I fucking hate it. I hate it every single time. Do you really think I want to leave the comfort of my wife in my bed at 4 a.m. and go fucking jogging in the dark in the rain? Like, no, I don't love any of that, but it's what I need to do to keep myself sane and, progressing. And Huberman said, that's amazing because the dopamine that you get from doing something that you hate is exponentially higher than the dopamine you get for doing something you like. So like when you learn to love exercise, like I can't wait to get it, you're not getting that same dopamine release. And so that's why you've got to like find something you hate and do that, because that's going to actually make you feel better because you didn't want to do it and you did it. And that's where you start to feel good. And so, I mean, that can be applied to addiction, to exercise, to any of the things that we hate doing. It's like, it's okay. Once you do it, you're going to feel super good.
Love that.
And once you don't feel good, find something else you hate doing.
Yeah, like running.
Oh, right, right. So like for example, I went to Aftershock. It was this 2-day music festival, and Tom's like, "Okay, let's get up early and go to the lifting gym." And I'm like, "Oh my god, I'm so tired. We're out late. We're on our feet. We walked miles. We got more miles to walk today. It's 100 degrees. I don't really want to do it. I'll do it for you." And so I go in, and I'm hating it. And of course, by the end of it, I feel so fucking good because I lifted heavy weights. He PR'd. Like it was such a feel good moment. I was like, that was the key. I didn't want to do it, and I did it, and now I feel even better. How great was that?
Love it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
When it
Yeah.
comes to, do you guys ever do like inner child work or anything like that at the
There's
treatment?
different, yeah, there's a lot of different. So I said we have our whole copyrighted curriculum. So we have a
Yeah.
whole 25 like experientials, 25 teams. We call them teams. It's not groups because it's a collaborative effort between like the primary counselors and the clients where they can work
Awesome.
together with different subjects or anonymously. We have, letter writing, we have journaling, like you name it. We attack that inner child and all that stuff from many different angles in a way that's digestible, that people understand, and it doesn't like sound too wooey or,
Yeah.
it's understandable, it's relatable, so that everybody gets something out of it.
I love it. Yeah, because I have a friend where, like, we were talking about the little dramas, and she is an inner child teacher and helps people through that and stuff. And she was talking about how if you had an experience in like elementary school where, let's say, you were doing something and a teacher in a red dress like yelled at you, and next thing you know, you're on a date with somebody when you're like 25 years old and they're wearing a red dress, like there's that like there's that pattern inside your brain that can trigger and immediately turn you off to this person, even though everything else about them is absolutely amazing. It's just
Yeah.
like that one thing. And if people have those like pathways to where it's like that happened, then they went to go use, and then they just keep building these along the way. So being able to like do that, like look back and figure all of
Mhm.
those out and start retraining those pathways, I bet you that's extremely powerful for your clients.
That's some pretty deep work, like to recall a red dress. But at the same time, we do versions of that. And certainly they work with a counselor one on one, and that stuff might come up. One thing that we do is called triggers. So we have them list out like all the things that basically trigger them, a liquor store, a pipe, a location, a person, like all the things that and at this point, they've already gone through like a lot of their life and recognize those things, seasonal triggers, this or that, and we have them confront that item or that thing for periods of time until it no longer creates that same effect. So after they leave and they pass a liquor store, they're not like instantly like, oh my God, I got to go use. They're like, they've already worked through those emotions and gotten to the other side of it so that their body doesn't respond naturally. And then they respond with what they've always done. So it's sort of a retraining of that sort of thing that we do with them.
Love it. Perfect. So like what's next on the horizon for you both personally and professionally?
Well, let's see. Personally, it's just more of the same. I'm mid 75 hard. I'm like day 37. So, continuing on that track of, working out twice a day and really clean eating. I'm really leaning into like the carnivore diet right now. I've
Love
always
that.
been super keto, but I've been around a lot of people who are getting a lot of benefits out of carnivore. And since like dairy and meat are my favorite food groups, I'm like, why am I not doing that? Like, I don't like vegetables, so fruit's like okay now and then. So yeah, why am I not doing this? So really just leaning in on my physicalness and mentality, getting ready for the holidays. It's always an interesting season for rehabs. Unfortunately, our numbers can go down, but it's really the time when people need us more because, again, the isolation, the constant triggers of families and different things that happen through the holidays. It's darker, it's colder. It's just like, fuck, we have an election coming up. Like the world is
Yeah.
not stable. And when the world's not in a stable place, that's really when people need us more. So, trying to reach those people and saying, hey, why not now? Like now is the time. Like come get the help you need.
Yep. No, I love that. And then for anybody that's, struggling with addiction, fitness, really kind of finding their purpose,
Yeah.
what's your best advice to help them kind of take control and turn things around?
Start. Whatever it is, just do something and start. Take that step forward. So many people are paralyzed by not being able to make a decision. And we live in a society where you are just flooded with so many options. So it's either like a gazillion options or no option because you don't know what's out there. But I would just say pick something and start. If it's your fitness, I always recommend CrossFit. It's a little pricey, but you always get one-on-one. It's a group mentality, that sort of thing. Or just even walking. Like I leash up my dogs and I go walk multiple times a day, get that vitamin D, get that exercise, get your breathing in. And
Nature.
just start. Yeah, just start doing something in the direction of all those things and keep taking steps on those things. So this is where like the wheel of life comes in, where you have to consistently be checking in all these areas and making progress in these areas, or your wheel or spokes get out of balance, and then you're spending too much time and energy here, not enough here. So you really want to make sure you're balanced and taking steps forward on all these things continually. And that comes from accountability and not giving yourself excuses or reasons why you can't. Oh, it was raining. It was this, it was that. That's why I love 75 hard. It's like, I don't care if it's a lightning storm. You still got to go work out outside one time a week. And it's like, but it pushes you to do things that you wouldn't normally do. And then you find the beauty in, wow, if I wasn't doing this, I never would have experienced this really cool thing. So
Yep.
I say challenge yourself. Find a hard ass challenge you don't think you can do, and then hold yourself accountable for it.
Yeah, I'd say 75 hard is definitely on the top of the list of something that's hard that most people don't think that they can do. I honestly have not been able to finish it. I usually,
Yeah.
not usually, the two times I did do it, I got to about 30 and then day 40. And I don't know what happened, but I tweaked my back in the gym. So I wasn't able to like continue to do both of the workouts, which sucked because I felt like I was pretty close to, I was like halfway on one of them, kind of combined halfway on both. But the changes in my own like mindset and everything
Mhm.
throughout those days. I mean, the one I lost 30 pounds in 90 days mixing
Yeah.
75 hard and keto. So like
Wow.
the benefits that it can give you is just incredible.
Incredible. And we were talking about the dopamine, just oh, I did that, read 10 pages. You feel
Yeah.
good. Oh, I drank my water. I stuck to my diet. Like you're building in all these like dopamine enhancers, and you look at it and you're like, wow, I'm going to be so busy. Like, how am I going to find, 2 45-minute workouts, this, that? I'm already got so much, but you end up becoming more productive. Like
Yeah.
because now you really got to be mindful of time management and this and that. And, I don't have time to rest right now because I'm going to have to do this. Oh, so I might as well do this and this before I have to do that. And I find that my production goes through the roof, even though I've added in all these other things. And so then I'm getting all that dopamine, which is making me feel even better on top of obviously the physical changes and everything that we go through. And like you said, it's hard. When we're doing hard shit we
Yeah.
don't want to do, that's where the benefits come.
Exactly.
I would have told
Well,
you could still modify. Like, I know you tweaked your back, but that doesn't mean you couldn't do
yeah,
some long stretching, sauna, walking. Like, you can lessen it. You don't have to like not do anything. I would have encouraged you to find alternatives to that if that happens.
yeah. I mean, I still went and did like the one workout. It was just the second workout just threw me off. But yeah, it's definitely something that I'm going to do again really soon here, just because even my wife was like, I can just tell the difference in how you show up every single day when you're doing it. And
Yeah.
although it feels like it sucks, your mood is so much more improved because you're accomplishing these things every single day, and it just makes you have this mindset of like, okay, I conquered this today. What can I conquer tomorrow, and how can I go bigger tomorrow, and just everything like that.
Yeah, I find like I really like the weekend. So it used to be, well, when I'm not on 75 hard, oh, this is my like hard rest and recovery reset. I'm not doing anything. I'm just watching football all day. that would be like my mentality. But with 75 hard, it's like you are going to watch football all day, but first you got to get in that morning workout, and then you got to do that night workout, and you're going to be drinking that gallon of water throughout the day, and don't forget to read, but then you have the whole day to rest. And I feel so much better after a weekend, even though I took the weekend for rest and recovery, because I was still doing these other things that most people aren't doing. And that was all I was doing. But mentally, physically, it still makes me feel like 1,000% better. And I still get to do all the things that I love.
Yeah, I'd say the hardest part of 75 hard is definitely the gallon of water.
Oh, by far the hardest part.
I can read 10 pages. I can do both workouts. It's that gallon of water that is.
Here's mine right here. I do these every day.
It's like every 20 minutes.
This is why I love, as one of my workouts, I'll do yoga in the infrared sauna. So I can easily drink this and at least half, if not the whole other one, just in that 2 hours that I'm in the sauna. And then I'm good for the day, besides the peeing for, the rest of the day. But that helps me get this water down like no other. You being in Florida,
that's what I was gonna say.
I mean, it's not as hot out there. It's got to be much easier for you guys to drink water.
Oh, it can be easy, but it's just tracking it, because I have a half-gallon water bottle as well that I just drink from, and sometimes I get so focused on writing that it's 8 p.m. and I'm like, oh my God, I haven't even finished the first half gallon. So then I drink it, and then I'm going to the bathroom every 60 minutes when I'm sleeping, and my sleep is shit.
Yep. And that's where that's that part of that training where it's like, okay, like whatever I'm doing, try to get half a gallon before lunch, and then try to get that other half before dinner. Then I can like work out and I not have to pee, and I'm not up all night peeing. But you're right. When there's a schedule change, you really got to be creative. Like I just went to Aftershock, and just the traveling and the upheaval and counting the ounces, because I can't bring in my container, and am I getting enough? It is kind of a pain in the ass. But again, I feel so much better. You can tell my skin, my everything, your body's flushing. It's doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's like pretty amazing when you have to drink that much water, when you see how good it makes you look and feel.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Well, Angie, it has been a pleasure to have you on here. If you want to let everybody know where they can find you, whether it's on social media, your website, I'll put those in the show notes as well.
Awesome. Angie Going Rogue on Instagram, Angie Manson on Facebook, LinkedIn, Angie Manson. I have a website, angiemanson.com. So it's pretty much Angie Manson, except for the IG with Angie Going Rogue.
Love it. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having, and that is also my podcast. If anybody wants to watch my podcast or listen to our podcast, you are on it, as well as other great guests. Going Rogue with Angie Manson on Spotify, YouTube, all the different things. And then if anybody needs help, elevaterehab.org. We're there 24/7. You can chat bot if you can't have a conversation. Anonymity is protected. We're there 24/7 to help people not just get into our program, but get them the help, education, and get into any kind of program or help that they need. So don't feel like you can't call if it's not 100% a lock with Elevate. We'll help you find where you need to go.
Love it. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.